Let's go ahead and get started for today's webinar. My name is Shelly Smith, and again, I have to give a big shout out to the entrepreneur organization in Southeastern Virginia for allowing me to come on, asking me to come on to talk about, workplace culture today. I feel like every day we wake up, there's yet another crisis that we're dealing with. So this is definitely an opportunity to come on and give you some tips, give you some things that maybe you've not thought about in the past. And my hope is, and my desire is, that you understand the importance of it as we talk about the strategy, the execution, the cash. It's all tied inside of people. So let me start by just talking about, this is a discussion about what we think is inside of our own petri dishes, inside of our own walls of our wonderful organizations that we own, that we're leaders in, or maybe for some of you who are on who actually help other individuals. And just to get started, I want to talk a little bit about myself. If you don't know who I am, my name is Shelly Smith. I've actually owned my current business, Premier Rapport, for 11 years. It's called, the tagline that I have is Culture Matters, and my zone of genius is absolutely inside of the people sphere. And of course, I focus on workplace culture itself. I've actually been in leadership for more than 35 years. Longer than I care to admit from an age standpoint. A lot of my foundation came from a family-owned business as well as Marriott International. I also worked in the hotel side of the franchises, and then I owned my own franchise, and then now Premier Rapport. I am the creator of the Culture Curator certification as well as a membership. ACC is Analyze, Curate, and Create. It's the entire system. It's my proprietary model that takes you into the impact model, which is intentions, measurements, processes, accountability, collaboration, and timelines and tactics, as well as the anatomy of workplace culture, employee empathy mapping, of course, the culture inquiry itself, and culture assessments. Some of my additional certifications outside of that also include EQI, which is emotional intelligence, the EQI 360 inside of emotional intelligence, Talent Optimizer, Predictive Index Analyst and Consultant. I'm also a top-selling author of 6 books. I'm published in Forbes, Money Inc., Entrepreneur. Locally, you can follow me on Inside Business in the expert panel area, HR News, the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, and a few other things. I also host, and I have a blast hosting, a couple of podcasts. One of them is called Your Morning Commute, where it's everything about culture in short little snippets. If you don't follow me, I encourage you to do so. And then also the Culture Hour, where I take a deeper dive with guests around everything workplace culture. I also want to let you know this is my amazing family. It adds to the level of who I am, and it adds to the level of the conversation that I'm going to have with you today, and conversations that I have with clients literally all over the world. So a couple of additional things that I want to talk about from a perspective standpoint is when I talk about that I've sat in the boat, which many of you have heard me say before, I say I've sat in the boat, I've gone out in a hurricane, and I've made it back to the shore. And what I mean by that is I understand what it is to sit in multiple positions inside of a company, from a family-owned business that I started working at the age of 11 in. I didn't understand the value of what entrepreneurship meant at the time, but I certainly do now, into the large corporation inside of Marriott, into the hotel franchise world, into companies where I grew them from 8 hotels to 35 hotels in an 8-year period. And then another in 2 years, I grew from 1 hotel to 6 hotels with a multitude of flags. And then I purchased a franchise myself. I took a lot of bumps and bruises, and then I got rid of that, and now I own what you see as Premier Rapport today. But inside of all of that is the center of me and who I am as a person, and the values that I bring and the lessons that I've learned. And that's what I mean when I say I've sat in a boat. I understand what it means to put together strategies, to be able to execute it, to understand the cash flow, the need at the end of the day. But it's all circled around people. It's all circled around people. A couple of things that you may, for anybody who actually follows me on on any of the posts that I talked to the social platforms is I talk about the problems. And when I talk about the crisis, you know, originally it started with, I think the bigger piece of the crisis that we're talking about is COVID-19. But it's also the crisis around the reentry and the rephasing. It's definitely the remote work for people who were not used to remote work, or we fought that inside of our system and then we were forced to. And then of course you add the incredible level of the recent events and the civil unrest around that. And then we're starting to ask ourselves if our business model still works. So we add that layer inside of that. And now we're looking at our profitability. And for those of us who had brick and mortar, who had an office where we brought people in, we're questioning if we really needed to do that. And so all of these things coupled with the idea of, is there a recession? Is there going to be a recession? And the cash that we have on hand, and what do we do with it? Are we frozen? Do we have discussions? Do we not? So one of the things that I pulled together in a variety of different publications is what you see here, you know, 12 cautions. And I love metaphors for people who don't know me, so I'm going to use a few of them today. But it's really things that I put together. I call it the dirty dozen, in order to be able to see if there's some additional links that are coming up inside of your culture around the communication and the gossiping, your business growth, or stopping or decreasing, or it's blowing up because of the crisis and you happen to be in the right place at the right time. Your turnover, maybe comments that are been made on Glassdoor or some of the other other social areas that are taking you by surprise. Maybe it's that gut feeling that you have, that things are just not right. And the list goes on. By the way, for anybody who wants this, if you just let Christina know, or you've got my contact information, I'm more than happy to send you this PDF as well, just as an additional reference piece. Why should you care? The problem is that workplace cultures have driven 20% of the US employees out of their jobs in the past 5 years. And let me say, these stats were put together even before COVID, so the numbers are even more astronomical for good reasons and for bad reasons. That equates to $223 billion, the cost of toxic workplace. Now I want to preference, toxicity has many levels. So there is the extremes that end up in the press, such as the many companies that ended up in the press from a Me Too standpoint, to the little things, the little leaks that start to creep up inside of everything that we do that's related to workplace culture. You know, there's cause and effects for each of these things. On the left-hand side, you know, these are the effects, or I call them the leaks, when we do not have synchronization around our core values and meaning, making them very actionable. How do they show up? What do your employees think, feel, say, do, believe, and do they match your core values? Do they match? Do you have a culture statement? Do you have a philosophy around your culture of what right looks like? Communication, how would they rate it? Do we address everything? Do we not address enough? Are we waiting? Are we frozen? Are we saying too much, too little, too late? Are we getting comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations that need to be had? You know, where is the foundation of trust inside of our company culture? And as owners, as executives, are you asking? Are you asking your team what they're thinking and what they're feeling? Because if you're not, I cannot stress enough that if you were having a problem before with turnover, with positions that were hard to fill, with employee relations, with EEOC, with profitability, with sales growth, lack of sales growth, not retaining your high potentials that you've deemed. If you were challenged with that before and you are not leaning in, the leak, metaphorically a dam that's starting to get eroded, is literally going to bust wide open. Is it too late? It's never too late. But if you're not leaning in, completely leaning in and having conversations in a completely different way with your team, and again, I'll go back to, what do they think? What do they feel? What do they say? What does right look like? inside of your team and your values as it relates to how do we problem solve? How do we onboard somebody new when they're now working remote? What is their perception of our culture and how we communicate and how we decision make? And how do we bubble up ideas? Have we moved into shared leadership and innovation and agility, or have we gotten frozen and we're just pushing out, sort of barking out orders and timelines that are no longer realistic? Have we adjusted those timelines? Are we role playing with our sales staff? Are we role playing with our customer service reps? Are we getting moments of time intentionally on how to train people? You guys, all of these things affect your cash, your strategy, and your execution. If you don't lean into your people, you're going to be a part of that growing number of that $223 billion. Now, obviously, that's $1 billion. You're thinking that doesn't apply to us. You know, the average turnover is at a minimum of 10K before we start for one employee, before we start to add in all of the intangible pieces, and if that was an executive inside of that. So another addition to all the crisis is the stress that we have as owners, that we have as executives, that your employees have, the burnout that they're feeling. They can't get away from work, especially if they're now working at home and they were never used to that. And again, and then you add the layers of how they socialize, how they thrive. You have engaged people that are now locked down, figuring out what is my company going to do. Maybe you as the owner are also trying to figure that out. And it's causing additional stress and additional burnout. And it's going to ultimately cost money. So kind of just to reframe this a little bit, culture is meant to be always your internal compass. You know, another metaphor for you that I've posted and talked about, you know, I'm going to say a professional football team. When they show up on Sunday for their game, eventually we'll have them live again, right? When they show up for their game and both teams go out on the field, don't they have a playbook? Don't they have a guide and a compass of what their go-to plays that they've practiced and how they're going to show up and how they're going to pivot? They take timeouts to stop and huddle about what they need to do differently offensively and defensively. That equates to what happens every single day on the field, on the day-to-day, inside of the walls of your company. So if we're not intentionally designing it from a playbook standpoint of what right looks like, it's costing you money. On the football field, it turns up in a loss. In business, it turns up in the pain points of turnover, cash flow, again, loss of sales, or the inability to increase sales and decrease profit. So just another way to sort of frame this inside of our discussion today. I've got some solutions for you, but are you willing? My guess is you're willing to at least have the discussion because you're here. That means you're committed, but I want to take the commitment and the passion into action. So here's some things that you can do if you've not done. Number one, if you're like, I think my staff is fine. I hope they are. Here's a quick way that you can check, and this isn't in the slide. A quick way you can check is on a virtual meeting, in a poll, in a quick survey monkey, or for those of you who are now returning to the office, just hand out some index cards or to do a quick poll on your screen and ask people, number one, to describe the culture now. Number one, just a few words. The second thing I want you to ask them is to describe the culture before COVID. Let's go back to November, December of 2019 at this point, because I feel like there's been a multitude of crises. How would they have described it before? List of words. And then let's move into how would you describe what it is you just answered in those two questions to what the written words are in our handbook and on our wall and on our website, mission, vision, values. How are we aligned? A quick down and dirty 10 to 15 minute exercise is uber revealing. The other caveat I would recommend is anybody that you've hired within the last 90 days, anybody since March, it's more than 90, anybody since March, separate how the answers are coming across because it's super revealing, because they have had a completely different experience than what people had before. And I want you to match them. And all I'm saying is give yourself a big thumbs up if everything is rocking and aligned in exactly what you wanted it to be. If it's not, go into action. Here's some suggestions. Number one, you need to clearly define the expectation. And I'm talking about what does success look like in its simplest form. In its simplest form to every single one of your team members, every single one of your employees, every single one of your executives, every single one partner to partner, because some of you are on the call have partners inside of your businesses. Is everybody on the same page with what success looks like? When you answer the question to one another, are you saying the same thing? So define it in order to build it, in order to maintain it. And talking about the culture is far less expensive than it is if you go into repair mode. I recently did a Forbes article, and so I did a common serve list in order to get some input. And I said, hey, who out there is spending more money on their workplace culture, their training and development? You know, I'm curious, what are the dollar spends? Well, within, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Help a Reporter Out, it's the site that I use. And as soon as my poll went out, because there's a litany that comes out 3 times a day, within 30 minutes, my inbox was packed. 75 companies of all different sizes piped in saying, yes, we have, and this is why. And of course, I gave them a litany of questions. So that was very exciting. And I hope that you're one of those people too who get maintaining is less costly than repairing. All right, culture playbooks. There you're defining what right looks like. There's some simple ways to do it and there's complicated ways to do it. But here's a get you started if you're not familiar with it. Take one of your values or a key action word out of your mission vision statements. So for example, we're innovative. You know, innovation or collaboration, those are 2 common things that I see. I just want you to spend 30 days of unpacking, in writing, yourself and your team members, how do they define what it is you do when you properly innovate, when you properly communicate? What is it that you do and what is it that you don't do so you can call it out? And that exercise literally within a week of everybody doing it. You've got word clouds that define it. You've got ways that you can update job descriptions, handbooks, job ads, your website, your marketing. You can create videos. It creates fun, energy, but it's like seeing a car that you just bought and you never noticed it before. Now you literally see it everywhere because you are clear on what it is that you're supposed to be looking at. So that's just a quick get you started on a culture playbook. Obviously, if you want to know more, by all means, hit me up. I can get you going on that. Culture curators. So what I mean by that is a few different levels, but what I'm talking about is who on your team, it can be you, it can be a designated proxy. Who on your team is the designated champion proxy around workplace culture? Who's the person who's owning it? And I'm not talking about HR. Can it be HR? Of course it can be HR, but HR isn't the only person or team that needs to own it. Everybody needs to own it, but you do need to start with a champion, a proxy who, it doesn't matter what role they're in, by the way. A lot of the culture curator members inside of my site and clients that I have, their proxies are anywhere from a frontline employee all the way up to the owner. So you decide, but you need to have somebody who says, hey, we're falling out of line, or that's not how we do things, or we need to further clarify XYZ to help you create, again, the culture playbook pages. And then communication. Solutions always, and problems, always begin and end with communication. So being transparent means being vulnerable, even more so these days as owners and executives. We've got to talk about the things that don't make us overly comfortable. And we've got to call them out, and we've got to put a stop to anything that's not right inside of the walls of our companies. Everybody's company commitments and values are different for a reason. But if you want change, you've got to instill change, and you've got to be the change, and you've got to open up the dialogue. Silence now around any of these crises, especially around the civil unrest inside of your workplace culture, is incredibly deadly. It is putting out environments and causing chaos unlike anything. it's better to say something to open up the conversation than to literally say nothing. Even if it's, I'm uncomfortable talking about it. Great, that's a start, let's talk about it. If you've not checked in with your team, if you haven't put out any sort of a statement and you don't know how, that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. All you have to do is lean in and call me. I'll be more than happy to do so, but please, please do something. Switching gears for just a little bit, I'm going to give you a tool. It's a great tool for you to use. And I'm going to frame this. I'm going to go through these slides really quick, but I'm going to talk about talent optimization and predictive index. So many of you know, and I opened up with saying that I provide, that I am a talent optimizer and a predictive index analyst and consultant. So here's a way that I can kind of reframe it for you and what it does that can help you with a multitude of the things that we've already talked about today. So when I talk about talent optimization, many of you, hopefully all of you, actually have a business model, you have a business strategy, you have profit and loss statements, hopefully you're looking at them on the monthly and maybe even getting highlights on the weekly, especially now to look at your cash flow, right? So you have that and you're doing that because you're looking for XYZ profitability at the end, the final bottom line of what it is that you need in order to continue, sustain, make the business grow. Maybe you want to sell it or what have you, but business strategy, most of you have it and you know you're looking for XYZ cash flow. What happens is we don't put an intentional plan in the white space in the middle, and the white space in the middle is the people. It's the workplace culture. It's the center and the end all and the be all. So what I mean by that is, how are you ensuring that you as an owner and your other top decision makers, or maybe board members and multiple partners, how are you aligned inside of the design from a strategic standpoint? Are you guys all on the same page? From there, you've got your strategies. Are you uber clear on the job characteristic needs to the organizational structure that you have? What is it that you're looking for? Who is the best fit in order to hire them, attract them, and now retain them, inspire them, keep them engaged, the almighty grail and the empower of employee engagement that everyone has talked about for years. The reason why you want to obtain employee engagement is simply because that's where your cash comes from. When you have engaged employees, you have effective, efficient, shared people who feel seen, valued, and heard, and they want to stay with you. And when they want to stay with you, the turnover goes away, and the outside marketing and the branding and the leaks shrink, and the praises increase, which brings you more customers, clients, strategic partners, and the list goes on. And then finally, inside of that is making sure that you're taking pulse checks. You're checking in on them intentionally and doing a diagnostic survey that takes a pulse check on the job, on the managers, on the organization itself, on the culture, and finally the engagement piece. So an entire piece and a spear inside of that. So creating alignment in order to create great hires, which helps managers inspire, and then finally that total piece, the holy grail, which is the engagement piece inside of that. You know, these are essentials. This is what exists inside of the very essence of our business context. It's driven by people data, and here specifically I'm talking about the Predictive Index tool, and it helps leaders at all levels be able to embrace and engage the entire team, and it helps protect against the 4 forces of disengagement. You know, when we hire people, everybody kind of comes in with that base of what it is that we have to do based on the job ad and the job description, what it is that we want to do as owners and executives. And then you start to disseminate and start to have disparity as things go along when you look at this from the bottom and the side axle of the job to the manager team and the culture. And what happens is people who start out, yes, engaged, in it to win it, I'm here, I got you back, I understand what I'm supposed to do. What happens is when we're not aligned from that design mechanism and clarity around what right looks like, and we're not onboarding consistently and pivoting and changing. And one of my colleagues now says, innovate on the pivot, which I love. And I totally get that. To be able to take the managers, to be able to shift and pivot with grace, which allows the team to shift and pivot with grace and allows your culture. So when these things are not in alignment and they're not fully engaged and they're not totally optimized, that's when the profit starts to go down. That's when the turnover starts to go up. That's when the bad press starts to go up. That's when the stress starts to go up. The bottom line at the end of the day, it always hits the cash at the end. So the 4 forces of disengagement is the job, the manager, the team, and the culture. And you have to have all of that stuff going simultaneously, intentionally at the same time. It's still a part of your daily functions. You just have to become more aware of it, more intentional with it, leaning into your proxies, leaning into your culture playbook pages. Defining what's right allows you to hold your team, including partner to partner, board member to board member, executive to executive, peer to peer, accountable. When we know what the end result is, it's so much easier to have accountability and success around it. So that's what I mean inside of that. You know, Predictive Index is a platform that doesn't solve all the social injustices that are happening now, but it can and it does remove the biases in the workplace, and it does enable you to hire fairly and promote equally and unlock everybody's employees' true potential on a higher level. And why wouldn't you want to do that? You know, for people to feel seen, valued, and heard. It gives your employees insight into one another from their similarities, from their differences. It helps shape a language that is common and respectful, and we can use it. It's fun, it's interactive, it's communicative. It tells us how we take action, how we decision make, how our team dynamics moves into a much healthier stride. It allows us to have diversity intentionally, people, personalities, multiple levels, and allows us to be productive and compassionate while we're working together. Again, who wouldn't want that? When companies invest in high quality, scientifically validated behavioral assessments, such as Predictive Index, and use them properly, the inclusion that starts to happen is nurtured, and every single employee's talent is optimized. And again, why would you not want to be a part of that? Why would you not want to create that? Why would you not want to be the buzz on the street? That people are dying to come into the walls of your organization. Susan Mann, who you guys probably know as well, her jam is absolutely everything related to sales. But one of the things that she's talked about recently is grabbing top talent. You know, being able to, in this time of COVID, when people are looking for jobs and intentionally leaving their job because their organization is dysfunctional and the leaks are getting, you know, now is the time that you can pull people in, but you want to have something great for them to come into and that they never ever want to leave, and they refer people just like them that makes them continue to be great. From a communication standpoint, this is a part of the survey that I took and got a couple of other points from other surveys. This communication piece has been a wake-up call, starting with the COVID piece of people being frozen, of not having things in writing, admitting that the crisis has definitely affected their work, their life, their health, personally, professionally. It's so hard to split it now. They've said that they don't have specific internal communication plans. They didn't have them, they still don't have them, and they thought that it was a short-term piece, and now it's turned into such a longer-term piece. And now we're not talking about waiting for the new normal. I call it the new normal, the new re-entry. It's here. We're already living it. We just need to own that we're living it, and we need to move on. We simply need to redefine the walls inside of our teams, again, of what's right and what's not right. How do we move together effectively, efficiently, innovative, agile, intentionally inside of that? So one of the Ernst & Young global risk surveys that actually came out this year, I saw this a couple of days ago, 79% of board members said that their organizations are not very well prepared to deal with a crisis, period, let alone the multitude of crises that we're having. So let's stop talking about it and do something about it, and take action. You know, again, why should you care? It's your bottom line. It also happens to be the community that each of us live in. And it happens to be very personal for each of us too, on many levels, differently than it ever has been before. And again, it's the getting comfortable with the uncomfortable in order to help us evolve our companies in a new, better, more efficient, more effective way. So creating a workplace culture roadmap around analyzing, curating, and creating. There are intentional steps around that. Again, additional solutions that I offer up. You just need to let me know if you would like to have more. You know, one of my favorite go-to things is workplace culture isn't built in a day. It's absolutely built every single day. And so with that, here is my information. I know you've got it from the registration that you did. There's my email address. We have, gosh, about a half an hour that's left. I go fast, I talk fast. You can see that I'm also an animated person, but I would love to open it up if anybody has got any questions, comments, further elaboration. My offer to you are these. If you've got questions on anything that I said today, you've got my email address right there. All you have to do is email me. You also see my phone number. I'm super responsive on texts as well. You can find me on literally every social media platform, from LinkedIn. I've got LinkedIn groups. I've got my business page, my personal page. I'm on Facebook, professional as well, Instagram and Twitter. The Culture Curators and Conversation is the membership site. You can also have certifications inside of that. That's a couple of icons from my Culture Hour and the Morning Commute if you're a podcast listener. And the other thing that I would like to offer to you today is if you're interested in knowing more information about Predictive Index, all you have to do, and you've never taken the survey, be more than happy to give you a complimentary survey so you can see what all the hubbub is about. And then if you've got additional questions, I'm looking, let me see. If you would like more information, you can see that Christina put something in the chat box for everybody as well. You've got her email address and you also have my email address. And again, because you attended today, it's my understanding you will get a copy of this recording as well. So Christina, are there any specific questions that you had submitted in before or that are coming across now that I have not seen?
No, I do want to make one comment. There are a few people listed as a participant who are not, it appears that they're not part of our chapter. So if you could just send me an email, or excuse me, send me an email or send me a message privately. That way I have your contact information so that I can send you a recording of the webinar. So that's for if any of you are not members of the EOS SIVA chapter. If you're not a member, please send me your contact information so that I can make sure that I can forward you a copy of the webinar.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Remember, it's easier and it's less costly if you define it, build it, and begin to maintain it, and then you can go to market in completely different ways. That's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some tidbits. I appreciate every single one of you tuning in, and I'm here for any questions. That's it.